So
All right,
road
we're good.
rage. Oh.
I had what I had done. Not that this much matters unless you guys love technical stuff, but I can make my plea again. Okay, we are live.
What'd you guys think of that picture I sent you last night?
Pretty amazing.
Wait, what picture are you talking about?
The picture that you
that
called
picture.
me an asshole for.
Oh, yeah, that picture, okay.
Yeah. That's something else, man.
Oh, I just got done playing an hour and a half of squash, and oh my god, I'm drenched right now, just soaked.
That's gonna attract webcast viewers.
Oh yeah. Well, if you want to attract webcast viewers, I'll show everyone the picture that I sent you guys.
No. Okay.
I had a person that told me that they lost their lunch after I sent it to them. I said, "Oh, sorry, man."
You can always find your lunch. Not a hard thing to find.
Yeah.
My lunch is in my stomach. Get in my belly.
All right, so there, guys, we are live. I'm sorry, Mike and I just entertained ourselves for about 15 minutes with some incredibly fun banter about Almost Famous and Wish I Was Here. Some really good movies talk.
Kate Hudson,
yeah. So
Sarah McLachlan.
Yeah, and I gave my bank account numbers out, and oh man, it was really something.
Personal phone numbers.
Yeah, everything was there. It was just, showed pictures of myself.
I gave out my address, but that was only for the females in the Western New York area. But
but that'll never be seen because I was doing it on some kind of test podcast that I set up a while ago that was not published anywhere. So that broadcast.
All right, people want to see it. Cover your eyes. Who don't want to see it?
Oh boy, I don't know.
Yeah, please, no.
I don't think so.
No?
It's really freaking impressive, but I don't think.
We understand that you're proud, but please, no.
I think we should probably avoid that for now.
All right.
Yes.
Just because people in the chat room are asking, that's the reason why.
No, go ahead.
Do
Go
it?
ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, Josh. This is Josh. I mean, this is really something. I mean, tell them. You should tell them what you weighed when you started this whole thing. Okay, here's Josh before and after. All right. That's that. Very good. Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you,
58 pounds.
Thank you, Chris Berry, for telling ACK what the date is.
Yes. 58 pounds.
Oh. And still going.
I am never.
Do it, Josh. What was that?
People are like, I've never heard of Hockey Buzz Hogwash or anything like that, so I don't know what you're talking about. Yeah, but anyway, there's a lot of crazies out there.
Just do it.
Somebody in the chat was. Never mind. Let's just start the show.
I think it's pretty impressive, man. That's a lot. I mean, take what you want. I mean, Josh, that's incredible. I mean, you are an inspiration because that is something.
Thank you, guys.
That is
in
not.
The chat room too.
Yeah, that's a lot of weight to lose, and that's a lot of work.
Yeah.
It's a lot of discipline. A ton of discipline.
That's the second person that's asked me, how big was the baby?
Nice.
Anyway.
All right, we will talk. We'll talk a little bit about the Montreal trade too. We'll talk about Montreal, the Montreal San Jose trade rumors for sure. We're going to get into arbitration today. Let you guys play the arbitrator on Ryan O'Reilly and Chris Kreider, and figure out what the heck's going on from there. And then take your questions. So here we go. It's Monday, July 21st.
That is correct.
So we were only. Actually, I'm wrong, right? Christmas, like halfway to Christmas, is June 25th, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So we're already. I was thinking we're near Christmas. We're near Christmas, and July is 4 days away.
Yeah, we're going downhill towards Christmas.
Yes, which is amazing, which makes me feel so much like time is moving too quickly in my life, because it feels like Christmas was just here.
Well, I mean, unofficially, the beginning of summer. I mean, in a roundabout sense, is Memorial Day. The midpoint is July 4th, and the end is Labor Day. And if you think about it, we're almost 3 weeks away from July 4th, so we're on the downward slope of the summer.
That's really depressing. I know.
And for hockey addicts, the beginning of training camp is the middle of September, so we're 7 weeks away from training camp.
7 weeks from training camp. We're going to get you there with Hockey Talk.
And I got some news kind of too for you guys.
All right, let's do that. Is hockey-related news?
I got some news.
Okay, all right. Let me get my lower third up. Sorry, and then we will begin the show. All right. Oh, cancel. All right, here we go. Get rid of that. Hey, Hockey World! It is Monday, July 21st, 2014.
I'm Michael Agello.
I'm Josh Rimmer.
And I'm Eklund, and you're watching the HockeyBuzzCast on HockeyBuzz.com on this fine day in July. Beautiful, beautiful weekend. Hope you guys had a good weekend. It's kind of a slow weekend in the hockey world for sure. No real signings, no real rumors flying around, except for the couple that I had, which the one is a really good one. So we'll get into talking about that shortly. But first, and we're also going to talk today a little bit about arbitration, because nothing brings the house down like good arbitration talks. I mean, if you ever want to party, if you ever want to cheer up your party, start talking about contracts and terms, and we'll talk about arbitration, how a player is arbitrated upon. Is that what happens? Not really, but how an arbitrator decides and what to expect. And we already have today, Mike. We've had one player avoid arbitration.
Mm-hmm.
Call from the governor as he was walking towards the arbitrator's room. Freedom. What's going on there, Mike?
The first scheduled arbitration hearing was Cody Franzen of the Maple Leafs. It was rumored over the weekend after the two sides came out. The figures came out. The Leafs had offered Franzen the same salary he made last year, which was $2 million. Franzen's representatives were asking for $4.2 million. The Leafs and Franzen agreed on a compromise. He's going to be making $3.3 million for 1 year, but the speculation is that Franzen is likely not going to be on the Leafs next season. I'm still skeptical whether he's an unrestricted free agent or a restricted free agent next year, because he only has 5 years of service right now, so I would think he's still restricted. But he's gone, or either held out or gone to arbitration the last 3 years, and with the development of Morgan Riley and Jake Gardner, Franzen is sort of like an extra offensive defenseman. So I think the Leafs
$3.3 million extra offensive defenseman.
Yeah, but the thing is, I think if you look at the signings that were made this summer, I mean, $3.3 million for Franzen is pretty reasonable when you put it up against Nikita Nikitin or Brooks Orpik or some existing contracts like Dennis Weidman. So I think for a team that is looking for a defenseman, like the Islanders, like Colorado, a few other teams out there, $3.3 million for Cody Franzen is fairly reasonable, and I think the Leafs can either get a relatively high draft pick, like a second-round pick, or maybe a good player in return. So I think Cody Franzen is probably going to be somewhere else next season.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that's probably pretty safe to say. I mean, 3.3. This brings up a point that Josh, I wanted to ask you about. I've had this discussion with agents over the years, and when arbitration happens is kind of unique in a way, because it's the timing of arbitration is a salary escalator, in my opinion. It basically, if arbitration were to happen before the UFA period happened, would Franzen get $3.3 million? But now that we've seen and the players, that have gotten signed and everything like that, even though there are specific rules about what you can or cannot apply, it seems like free agents are convinced that the reason arbitration works so well for players sometimes is because of the timing of it.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that has a lot to do with it, and the thing that I find interesting is the fact that Franzen making $3.3 million for a 1-year deal, and Nikitin's making $4.5, and I love throwing this out there. Nikita Nikitin, $4.5 million. Who's getting more value? Franzen at 3.3 or Nikitin at 4.5.
Well,
You think a team like Edmonton would be interested in a guy like Franzen, 3.3 million. I mean, that's for a guy that could play top 4 minutes, even sometimes top 2, first pairing on the power play, to a guy like Nikitin who's going to be your your third pairing, maybe your fourth defenseman.
Edmonton has enough defensemen who can't play defense, Josh. I mean, that's the problem. Yeah. I mean, Cody Franzen is strictly an offensive defenseman. He's a power play specialist, but
that's what Edmonton needs, right? I mean, this is something that they've coveted for a long time. They've needed a guy like that. Justin Schultz was like that the first year. I think he took a little bit of a step back this past season, maybe sophomore slump, if you will. Or maybe the fact that he played in the AHL last year during the lockout and then came up to the NHL and did really well. But I mean, this is the kind of guy that that Edmonton would be looking at. They've wanted that top offensive defenseman to get him, $3.3 million. Maybe they could even get better than a draft pick from the Oilers for Cody Franzen.
I actually think that the better fit for him, or the two teams I mentioned. I mean, if you look at the Islanders right now, other than an aging Lubomir Visnovsky and T.J. Brennan, who won the AHL version of the Norris Trophy, they really don't have a defenseman who I would consider a top-line offensive defenseman. Colorado, I mean, was forced to use guys like Stastny and forwards on the point on the power play at times last year. They really, other than Eric Johnson, don't really have a significant offensive defenseman. So, I mean, Franzen there would make a little bit of sense, but it's just theorization here. But I think there is value out there, there is interest out there, and there is value for Franzen coming back. I think the Leafs, they need a winger probably to play in their top 6. I mean, if you put 2 and 2 together with the Islanders, we've talked about Josh Bailey, who can play either wing or center, being a potential guy that they will trade. That kind of a deal makes sense for both teams.
Yeah, that does. It does. I mean, I think that's where they have to go here, right? I mean, in a way, he is a deal at 3.3. In a way, it also seems kind of ridiculous that he's an extra defenseman at 3.3. Although he can play the minutes. He seems. I mean, from an outsider, not watching the Leafs as much as you guys do, and then we'll move on from Franzen. It seems as if Franzen is just one of those guys who's never going to really be what they want him to be. Like, it seems, it just feels to me like they're just, because they're never real. I mean, maybe it's because he's just always up for arbitration or some kind of salary or something, but it seems like he's just not living up to promise.
Well, the thing is he's a big defenseman, but he doesn't play big. He's 6'5", 217 pounds, I believe. He led the league in hits, but he's really not a physical defenseman. I mean, which is sort of would sound like a contradiction, but it isn't. He's an offensive defenseman, but he's not particularly mobile. So there's a contradiction. He's good on the power play, but he's horrific defensively. He was -20 last year. They moved him up to a top 4 role after a really good year 2 years ago, and he couldn't handle it. So he's a guy who plays 21 minutes but can't handle a top 4 pairing role on a team. So he's sort of a tweener. I mean, for certain teams, he would solve certain problems. I just don't think that team is Toronto. And like I said, with the addition of Roman Polak and Stefan Robida, who are both right-hand shot defensemen, and Phaneuf prefers the right side, Franzen is sort of an extra defenseman, and that's why I think that he will be shopped. And if he hasn't already been shopped, I mean, he was included in the deal, the aborted deal for Josh Georges. So I think it's likely that he is moved before training camp starts.
Yep. Yeah, it'd have to be. I mean, if he is your 7th defenseman, 3.3 is a lot. And and when we've seen what defenseman is signed, if he was a UFA, what would he be getting? What would he be getting? I guess you have to look at and say to yourself, now it is interesting when you look at the because I'm bringing up the arbitration rules now for everybody in the chat room and for all those watching, because we're going to play arbitrator today, which on Ryan O'Reilly and Chris Kreider. So basically, the evidence that can be used in an arbitration case, the player's overall performance, including statistics in all previous seasons. Well, that makes sense. Injuries, illnesses, and numbers of games played. The player's length of service with a team and in the NHL. The player's overall contribution to the team's success or failure. the player's special qualities of leadership or public appeal. Public appeal. I never realized public appeal was part of this, but it is. The performance and salary of any player alleged to be comparable to that player in the dispute. Okay, so those are things you can include in your arbitration. And let me go through, because the things you can't include is pretty small, and then I'm going to talk about my thoughts on some of the things you can't include. The salary, these are things that are not admissible. The salary and performance of a comparable player who signed a contract as an unrestricted free agent. So we talked about now, like July 5th doesn't, they say, that means this July recent free agents period can't affect this. Like they're saying it can't use, Nikitin's numbers there. But I find it hard to believe that doesn't play a part of it. It's because every year it seems to. Testimonials, videos, and media reports. So media reports are not admissible, which I don't know what a media report would be. So I guess if I listed all the players' previous statistics in a media report, it would suddenly not be admissible. So there's not over there. Anyway, the financial state of the team is not admissible, and the salary cap and the state of the team's payroll is not admissible. So that last one is a biggie, because when you think about it, that's how you signed. That's how GM sign contracts, right? I mean, that's what you have to look at how this player fits into your team and fits into your structure and where your team's at, and that's not admissible with an arbitrator. So that's why a lot of these cases go. That last one is why they die before arbitration, I was told, and it makes sense, because teams are like teams. That's why we think people, in the James Reimer case, for example, maybe they walk away from there because it's we can't. The fact he can throw his numbers up, but the fact that he's a backup goalie doesn't matter.
Well,
according to this,
I made the error earlier in the week regarding Reimer with the new CBA. If the award is less than $3.5 million, the Leafs can't walk away. But I don't think it's going to get to that point, and I don't think it's that Reimer's, and we won't know about what Reimer's agent is going to throw out there as their figure until probably the weekend. But it's probably not going to be anywhere close to $3.5 million, because he was a backup goaltender last year, and his statistics in the second half of the year were pretty brutal. So.
Right.
It actually, in a way, benefits Reimer to keep his salary figure low, because that'll make it easier for the Leafs to potentially deal him if they do. But and we're going to talk about O'Reilly in a minute here. But one of the things and the difference between the two guys that you mentioned, Kreider and O'Reilly, is that O'Reilly is club elected salary arbitration, not the player, and that is different, and I'm not a lawyer, so I can't tell you all the differences. All I know is that if they would have qualified him, if the Avalanche would have qualified him after the 2 years that were put forth because of the offer sheet from Calgary, they would have had to pay him 10% more, or at least qualified him at 10% more of the last year of the contract that he had signed, and he made $6.5 million on that last year. So it would have been $650,000 more. It would have been over $7 million. And the one thing that the Avs do not want to do, and I can continue to stress this point, they do not want to pay Ryan O'Reilly more than Matt Duchene, and that's the whole motivation for this club-elected salary arbitration.
Well, here you go. Go ahead, Josh.
Well, speaking of Ryan O'Reilly, I was just skimming through a great read all the time is Elliot Friedman's 30 Thoughts. It's more like 50 thoughts today, and he's got a good thing here on Ryan O'Reilly. Paul Stastny's gone, and we've got to think Ryan O'Reilly will follow. When Colorado was winning Stanley Cups, they had one of the NHL's highest payrolls, and those players deserved it. We're not talking about Waugh, Sakic, Blake, and Forsberg here, but you see the potential, and more importantly, for the Avalanche, the local interest generated after years of apathy. The more logical rationale is Colorado wants to make sure its salary structure eventually fits underneath Nathan MacKinnon, but will the earth be scorched in attempts to get there? The good news is the $1.225 million difference in arbitration filings is actually less than the rumored gap in O'Reilly's contract talks.
Yeah.
The tone from both the Avalanche and agent Pat Morris, will be critical. It will not be hard to ignite a power keg. Suggestion: Colorado shouldn't use the elephant and the mouse story Brian Burke tried with Brendan Morrison years ago. That didn't work.
Yeah. I mean, that's a good point. It depends on how you. I mean, the rumors are. I've heard it's as much as 1.5 difference, but it's not. We're not talking about a huge difference between the two, no matter how you slice it. Which is what it should be compromisable, right? There should be a compromise in there.
Yeah.
However, what which makes me think that this Ryan O'Reilly thing is about something else. Like, it makes me think this isn't about this might be about both teams. Let me think of a way of putting this, because I do have something information I can't talk about a little bit. But all right, let's say Ryan O'Reilly wants to stay a member of the Avalanche for a long time, right? And if he wants to be a member of the Avalanche for like the next 6 years, or 7 years, or 8 years, what he's going to obviously ask for, $7 million a year over 8 years or whatever, get a high number.
Right.
The Avalanche are going to say, well, that's ridiculous. We can't do that. You're paying more than Duchesne, and we've got McKinnon coming up and all that. What you're talking about, Mike. So what does he do then? He then says, okay, well, then I want a short-term deal so I can become a free agent.
Right.
That kind of discussion, that kind of talk is getting that camp in trouble, because we're sort of at the point where both sides want this to go to arbitration, because both sides want an out. That's the weird thing about this. We haven't had an arbitration like this in a while. I would be kind of surprised if Ryan O'Reilly settled just because of this, because I get the sense that both sides. Well, I get more than a sense. I think both sides want the arbitration here. I think both sides want a 2-year deal or a 1-year deal signed by the arbitrator, because it gives the Avalanche can say, listen, that's, we couldn't go for what he wanted to do, and they have an out in 2 years. And the same goes for Ryan O'Reilly without really, ticking off the team and all that stuff. So
I think that's a huge blow, though, Eck.
It is a blow.
They lose both Stastny and O'Reilly in the offseason. Two centers.
Yeah, but you're eliminating the fact that they're going to get something of quality back for O'Reilly. I mean, okay, say for example, the two sides decide to go to arbitration because they want that short-term deal. Once that short-term deal is put in place, O'Reilly's on the trade block, probably, because he's locked in. Maybe they keep him the first year. They go along with what they have, but they're going to have to pay McKinnon start after July 1st. Next summer, they're probably going to lock him up on a long-term deal, because he'll be in the second year, or going into the third year of his entry level, and they can sign him to the long-term extension. And it makes sense for them to lock him up for 8 years right now. But the mentality of the Colorado Avalanche organization, and to me, it's unquestioned that this is the case, has always been Ryan O'Reilly is behind Matt Duchesne. Matt Duchesne was the 3rd pick overall. Ryan O'Reilly was the 2nd-round pick in that draft. They both made the team as 18-year-olds. Ryan O'Reilly is not as prolific offensively as Matt Duchesne, but Ryan O'Reilly is more of a complete player than I think Matt Duchesne is. And Ryan O'Reilly, rightly or wrongly, wants to be paid on par with Matt Duchesne. If he can't get it in Colorado, he's going to get it somewhere else. Yeah. And I think that's what is at heart here. He'll probably agree to that 2-year deal, but he's probably going to tell them after that, I'm gone after those 2 years. So you better trade me now, because you're not going to get a damn thing for me in 2 years.
Well, right, and the thing, now the difference, like we talked about before Josh had his note, we were talking there for a second about the fact that what's the difference in team arbitration, and the difference in team arbitration is, like you said, if they qualify him, they have to pay him 10% raise. By taking to arbitration, they can pay him 15% less. Essentially, it's 85% of his contract, right? So.
Right.
They can dock him. Now, it doesn't make sense that you would dock Ryan O'Reilly after the season he had last year, when you think about it. But then again, they can make the argument that they didn't sign the contract. They matched the contract with Calgary, so they're already paying more. So this is where this whole thing gets really messed up, and very dysfunctional. And this is why the belief was that when Sakic came in and Waugh came in, that past would be the past, and the Ryan O'Reilly issue would be over, and everything would be fine. Everybody would be happy. But what's happened is kind of the opposite of that. It's very much continued over. I don't really blame Ryan O'Reilly on this. I think it's just one of those situations that sort of has been created by the fact that he signed an offer sheet. They matched it, and for more than they wanted to pay, like you said. But again, this was another instance where Colorado was given a specific out. And the Avalanche can sit there and say that they haven't been in control of Ryan O'Reilly's contract at all over the last several years because they matched an offer to an arbitrator to what? So they're really not paying him what they think he's worth. And
the two scenarios, O'Reilly and what we were just talking about in Franzen, in terms of the difficulty that they've had within their organizations to get the long-term deal that they've wanted or to get what they believe that they are worth, I think go hand in hand. I think it's all about right now. It's all about respect. This guy won the Masterton. He had a great year last year. He's I think an equal to Duchesne as a player, but last year he had to play out of position and play on the wing with Duchesne because they brought in McKinnon, because they have Maxim Talbot, they had Paul Stastny. Now Stastny is gone. This team, right now they have 3 centers who are, I think, good offensively. Even if they trade O'Reilly and they get themselves an equal player who's a winger or a defenseman, they still have McKinnon and Duchesne as their 1-2. That's not too shabby. That's enough that in a couple years, if they build the rest of the team adequately, that's a Stanley Cup contender because they have top two centers.
Right, and at that point, it becomes harder for Ryan O'Reilly to leave too because he's leaving a Stanley Cup team. Or if he does leave, it becomes easier for them to take his money and sign anybody because they're a Stanley Cup team. So, in actuality, it's very complicated, but you can see how this plays out. So I did a little poll on the in the chat on my blog here. If you're an arbitrator, because like you said, this is a situation where they have to reward him one of 2 numbers, right? So 6.75, 5.25, big difference, but still difference. And 60% of 1,500 people who voted in the last hour have said that they would give him the 5.25, that they think he's not worth 6.75.
And most of those votes came from Denver, I'm sure.
Yeah. I mean, that's pretty cool. So all right, we're gonna go talk about Chris Kreider as well. But let's go to Josh, who's got some stuff here for us.
A few things, guys. Aaron Portzline from the Columbus Dispatch late last night reporting that sources have told him that Ryan Johansson's agent Kurt Overhart made a recent proposal to the Blue Jackets, including a 2-year contract term, the type of bridge contract that Johansson referred to as a slap in the face last month. The Jackets have stood firm, offering Johansson only a 2- or 3-year deal, saying they want a player who remains motivated to be one of the elite players in the NHL. Now it looks like Johansson's side is willing to sign a short-term contract. Perhaps now they could focus on what is typically the biggest hurdle in any negotiations, which is money. Overhart had pitched a 4-year offer to the Jackets. Now it's down to 2. Could a deal be close now in Columbus?
Yeah,
I think so.
Yeah, we talked about this on Friday.
A 4-year deal. See, this is the same talking points that happened with Nazem Kadri last year. He was asking for a 4-year deal. He was asking for a 5-year deal.
But who's basically a better deal, Mike? Who's a better player?
I think Johansson's a better player. Yeah. But the thing is, after his entry-level deal, a 4-year deal is right to the doorstep of unrestricted free agency. It's not happening. They're not going to let him do that. A 2-year deal or even a 3-year a 3-year deal is even risky because you're 1 year away.
Yeah.
It's a 2-year bridge deal, and it's now going to be haggling about the money, and I'll bet you anything it'll end up being over $3 million per year.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. I mean, but he's the kind of guy you definitely don't want to prolong the negotiations because this kid's is the face of the Columbus Blue Jackets franchise. I think between him and Bobrovsky, that's their 2 best players on the team. And Johansson's going to be a star in the league. He's going to be a top 10, top 15 goal scorer. I mean, he showed last year the kind of player he could be. The year before that, he wasn't as good. He wasn't good on the puck, but he worked very hard in the offseason last year to get his weight up and get a little bit more explosive on the ice, and he is. I mean, every time he touched the puck this past season, especially in the playoffs, you could see that he was explosive and dangerous and can score the big goals. And I watched many Blue Jackets games last year, guys, and every time overtime happened in the regular season, everyone thought it was going to be him who scored, and sure enough, he had quite a few overtime goals last year.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think he's going to get 5 per year. I
On a
think.
2-year deal?
Yeah. On a 2-year deal, I think he'll get more. And you think,
Mm.
because a 2-year deal is taking some risk. I really could see. I think no. I think 5. I think 5. I mean, when you consider what he is to the team, if you look at, even not their arbitration because not going to arbitration, but even if you just in general what you would consider as to what he means to the team, it's 5. Yeah, $5 million. I wouldn't be shocked at all.
He'd be worth every penny too.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially with a team that historically had trouble scoring. It's a guy you want to keep in your good graces. So if they paid him that much, I don't think it would be bad. But I'd be surprised if it's that much. I'd say 3.5 to 4 at most, but we'll see.
Other things I want to bring up. Back to Elliot Friedman's column. He mentions been talking about bridge deals. It seems like that's kind of the theme of the show today.
Yeah.
Elliot Friedman saying that could see 2 University of Wisconsin alumni, Jake Gardner and Justin Schultz, both agreeing to short bridge deals.
Yep.
So it seems that's the thing now, the bridge deals, the 2-year deals.
Oh, yeah. Well, they make sense, right? And they are kind of, they're sort of the byproduct of salary cap leagues. There's not the NHL's just following the other leagues, that have had salary caps, or bridge deals have existed for a while.
Well, it's the factor that these players they have absolutely no leverage other than holding out. I mean,
right.
After the entry level deal is done, they have no arbitration option. They have no offer sheet option. They're stuck. Right. And teams, if you sign the 2-year deal, so you get 2 years at probably a reasonable rate, and I think probably Schultz and Gardner being former defense partners at the University of Wisconsin, good friends and similar players, they're probably going to end up around $3 million on those 2-year deals.
Yeah.
Though that's in the ballpark of what they will likely get. And that makes sense. And then after those 2 years, then they have arbitration options. Then they, Toronto and Edmonton can either sign them to long-term deals or, reevaluate what they are or where they are in their careers.
Right. No, I agree. Let's move on to Chris Kadri, and then we'll come back to
Chris Kreider.
Chris Kadri.
Nazem Kreider and Chris Kadri. There you go.
And I got a lot of stuff on the Islanders too.
All right, we'll come right back to that after this. I want to talk about the Rangers and Kreider for a second because I told people we would. And the other, now Kreider is apparently, these sides, I do believe that a deal will get done. I don't think this is going to go to arbitration. Mm-hmm. It's very close. But I honestly think that, you look at the Rangers, they've got 3 main guys they got to sign. They got Zuccarello, they've got Brassard, and they've got Kreider. Right. Kreider's going to get by far the least amount of these 3. But I honestly think that 3 years from now will be the best player of these 3. That's my prediction. So he's got, he's going to get $2, maybe $3 million, somewhere in there from arbitrator or wherever they come up to their decision. Zuccarello is looking for $5.5 million, or no, Brassard's looking for 5.5, and Zuccarello's looking for 4.5. That is, Brassard has really not earn the right to be asking for $5.5 million, in my mind, at all. I mean, that's kind of insane. I mean, what are your thoughts? If you're the Rangers, you may have to get rid of one of these guys, and I think Brassard is the guy you're going to have to get rid of. The other 2 are speedy, players that they really need. They need the speed, they need the offense. Brassard is up and down, and at times, looks amazing. At times, looks really bad. That's just, Josh, thoughts on Brassard or?
On Derek Brassard, I've always liked the kid. I liked him, obviously, former Columbus Blue Jacket. He had all the potential, and he scored another guy that scored some pretty big goals last year, albeit a contract year, obviously, for Brassard. But he seemed to be a man on a mission in the playoffs. Yeah. Obviously he hasn't really got much of a sniff of the playoffs. I think no, he wasn't on the team the last time Columbus was in. So this was really Brassard's first playoff season, and we finally saw Brassard is a playoff player. He could probably still put on a little bit of muscle, but the kid is was pretty lights out in the playoffs. I was very impressed by the play of Brassard. I think is he worth around maybe $3.5–4 million a year? Could be.
He scored 18 goals last year, in 81 games.
Yeah.
That's not a $5 million player.
No,
and that's why I said 3.5, 4.
He's asking for 5.5. So that's my thing.
Yeah, he's not worth 5.5.
He's asking for 5.5 because Brad Richards is gone. That's why, because he sees the gap there with the buyout of Richards and says, okay, I'm the number 2 center on this team. Now that Richards has been bought out, and they need to pay me like a number 2 center. He had some good years in Columbus. He does have a lot of talent. He's coming off a contract where he was making $3.2 million. He wants a raise, and he played well in the playoffs. Is he a $5 million player? Not in any lifetime. Yeah. But I'm sure that's what they're shooting for. Now, we were talking about Kreider. I mean, Kreider, he came in a couple years ago, played really great in the playoffs, and then last year or 2 years ago, under Tortorella that was a disastrous year for him because him and Tortorella didn't get along. He played most of the year with the Connecticut Whale of the AHL, and then last year he played great in the playoffs and great during the regular season. That's the problem. He's only got 1 year where he's shown his abilities, and that's going to be a tough nut to crack in terms of getting anything longer than a 2-year deal at probably around $3 million. Zuccarello, I mean, I think he's a phenomenal player, but if he's asking for $5 million, let him go back to Norway.
You can't. I mean, he's.
I know. I'm joking, but I mean, you got to be reasonable here. They have $13 million under the cap, but they have 4 RFAs to sign, I believe.
Yep.
These 3 and John Moore. I mean, at some point you got to say no to one of these guys and say, okay, you got to take a more reasonable deal because they just can't pay them all what they want.
Agreed. What do you have, Josh, on the Islanders?
Yes, a lot of good stuff. This Elliot Friedman column is great today. He really did a great job on it. The Islanders, since we don't talk about the Islanders too much, a lot of great stuff here. First of all, the Islanders apparently were prepared to give Jarome Iginla a 4-year deal. Obviously, you chose Colorado. Islanders, with the Glennis centers, Capuano said that Brock Nelson is going to get a shot at the wing with John Tavares, who apparently is skating again now, and Kyle Okposo. Nelson played with them on the power play and spent time on the wing at the World Championships. Franz Nielsen is now not switching positions. Franz is one of the smartest players in hockey, and he thinks the game as a center, and that's according to Capuano. As for Miguel Grabovski and Nikolai Kumelin, Capuano did not promise that they would be united, but we do know what the advanced stats say about them together. As for the sale of the Islanders, it's difficult to know for sure, but word last week was the sale from Charles Wang to Andrew Barroway hit a snag. What's uncertain is if it means there will be no sale or if there will be no sale to this particular buyer. Whatever the case, things are a little cloudier than expected with ownership, guys, and that's from Elliot Friedman. That's as for the Islanders. Well, and I want to finish. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, I mean, one of the things with the Islanders, I mean, they do have a lot of young talent that should be ready to play in the NHL this year. Griffin Reinhart, former first-round pick on defense. Calvin DeHaan played a little bit last year, and it just signed a new deal, so I think he's going to make an impact. I do think they made a good signing with T.J. Brennan, who played for the Marlies last year, and I think is an NHL defenseman. I still think that the signings of Grabowski and Kuhlman were ridiculous in terms of the amount that they paid for them, but they have so much cap room that that's not a consideration. Where they their fate rests with obviously Tavares coming back 100% healthy, but they have a kid like Ryan Strome who has a lot of talent, played for Niagara in the Ontario Hockey League, top 5 pick for them, who played mostly in Bridgeport last year. A lot of talent. Question of whether he's going to play center. whether he's going to return to Bridgeport for another year or if he might play on Tavares' wing instead of a guy like Nelson. They have a lot of young guys who need to step up if they're going to make a run at a playoff spot. And there might not be a spot left for a guy like Josh Bailey, like we talked about earlier, who has been supposedly on the trade block the last 2 or 3 years. So they're going to be a very interesting team to follow this early next season.
Oh, I agree. I mean, the Islanders are, somewhere in the chat room quietly getting good. I think it's pretty noisily getting good, actually. I think a lot of people in the NHL are starting to really, understand what's going on there. I mean, the question is like Edmonton, can they turn that corner? It's one thing to have talent, and it's another thing to play hockey. Which is, when you think about the arbitration thing, that's kind of the last thing I wanted to say about the arbitration issue is I don't know how you can really judge a hockey player's talent by the list that they give you. I mean, obviously all those numbers and statistics, we talk about Corsi all the time, all that stuff is one thing, but hockey is such a different sport than any other sport. What a player brings to a team in the locker room, what a player brings to the team chemistry-wise, what a player, what a player does, he scores clutch goals at clutch times, things like that. You just, hockey is such a strange sport for that kind of stuff. To try to, to arbitrate it out the way they do, it's really tricky. And I don't want. I'm glad I'm not an arbitrator, I guess is what I say, because it's a hard one. It's a hard call. All right, so one other thing I wanted to touch on today, because I did promise people I would talk about it, and then we can go back to some questions as well.
I got some more stuff too.
Oh, cool. Might save some of it for tomorrow because we actually are sort of running out of time here, but we have. I did put out yesterday that the Montreal Canadiens were talking with the San Jose Sharks about a trade involving a big player, and I had this in a really good source. It's these discussions are absolutely happening. The extent of which I get to actually put names onto it is tricky. I can give you some possible names that I've heard, and then from what I've been told so far, that yes, Patrick Marleau is the key figure in this, and there was discussion about Joe Thornton too, but it would be Marleau that would go to Montreal. And Marleau is a guy that Montreal's wanted for years. I mean, years. When I say that, they've looked at him before. Another guy that could be involved also as well would be Adam Burish, who could possibly be going in this deal. And coming the other way, I've heard lots of different names. Rene Bourque is definitely one of them. That comes to mind. Obviously, there's a couple prospects that are young that so far as of this point are off the record to talk about, but that San Jose likes, and San Jose also likes Emelin. So the question is how this will play out from here. There's a lot of names being discussed, but it does sound like there's two teams here. I mean, Rene Bourque, they've got to move, right? He wants out of there.
Right.
He's a talented guy. He fits into the San Jose culture very well. But Emelin, San Jose's got to pick up a defenseman like that. That's the kind of defenseman that could help them a lot. This is a good, solid move for San Jose to get, Bourque and Emelin for Marleau and perhaps, Burish. These names again, and there are some prospects also, and there are some other draft picks and things like that. But that's the roughness of it right now.
Yeah.
Well,
Montreal is in an advantageous position because they have a couple highly regarded defensive prospects who I think most people think are ready for the NHL. Nathan Beaulieu and Jared Tenorti. Tenorti played at times last year. Beaulieu played in the playoffs and didn't seem out of place really. And plus they need to clear the cap room to sign Subban to a long-term deal if they want to get him on the max deal. I think that's their intent. I think they want to sign him, and probably it's going to take $9 or $10 million on an 8-year deal to get him locked up for a max deal. So they may need to clear Emelin's money, which I think is over $3 million. So
4.1.
Yeah, 4.1. So it makes sense.
Yeah. So that's something to keep an eye on. I'll definitely keep tracking it. It's not one of those trades that's going to happen tomorrow, I was told, but it's one of those things that's definitely being discussed, and these two teams have had a lot of discussions in the past, so we'll see where they go from here. Josh?
Yeah, I just want to bring. I know this is becoming the Elliot Friedman show, but like I said, he wrote had some good stuff. The Dallas Stars are planning for Ales Hemsky to start this year with Jamie Benn and Tyler Seguin. They are shooters, GM Jim Nill said. We need a passer with them. Asked who Spezza gets, Nill first mentioned Valery Natushkin. After living with a local family much of the year, he's now on his own. Nill expects a similar big step on the ice in the player's second season, and lining up with Spezza could do that. Now, I am surprised, though, because Hemsky and Spezza had some pretty good chemistry last year. But I think that would also be an interesting line with Hemsky, Benn, and Seguin. I mean, it's possible Hemsky could go back to his regular form of being maybe a 60, 70-point forward, as long as he stays healthy, guys.
I mean, that being said, talking line combinations in July, the first couple games in the preseason, if they find that it doesn't work, they'll move Hemsky to play with Spezza. So, it's interesting to discuss right now because there's not a lot to discuss. But, I mean, Hemsky and Spezza did play well in a limited window in Ottawa, and I think that if that experiment doesn't work, if they find another winger who fits well with Benn and with Seguin, then they would just move Hemsky down to play with Spezza. So we'll see. When training camp rolls around, we'll see what the combos are.
My question on that is there enough puck to go around on that line? I mean, that's a lot of... I mean, Hemsky's a guy who likes to carry the puck through the neutral zone, and so does Seguin. I mean, they're two guys who really are puck carriers. Benn is okay, being the digger and getting the shots off, but Seguin and Hemsky are two guys. I mean, the good thing about Spezza and Hemsky, because they both also are guys who want to carry the puck a lot, but Spezza will pass the puck off a lot quicker. So I don't, that my question there is Seguin's more likely to hold on to the puck. Hemsky, you really want to create space. The one thing you're obviously going to do with that is you're going to create a lot of space for, for Benn. But and that is about it is about creating space sometimes. So Hemsky, I don't know if it would improve Hemsky's numbers as much as it might improve Benn's numbers, to be honest.
And Lindy Ruff has a history of always, in Buffalo, he always has a history of, if he had two offensive players on a line, he always wanted to put the third guy as being more of a two-way or a defensive guy. So, to me, that's a line, all three guys are offensive-minded, and I think you open yourself up to the possibility of counterattack with a guy like Hemsky joining Benn and Seguin. And Seguin is still a young center and still prone to some defensive gaffes, although he improved greatly last year. I would think they might put more of a veteran presence on that line, somebody who would cover up for their mistakes.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Now, I look at the Dallas Stars, and they look like a very, very lethal team. I mean, this is a team that obviously is going to make the playoffs, I think, this year. But on the other side of it, they have the great firepower. They have the great forwards. The defense is pretty good. I think the question remains is Kari Lehtonen. Is he really your number one goalie? He's making $6 million a year, guys. And
I mean, healthy,
that's always the question with him.
That's my point. His health has been a huge concern over the last couple of years. I mean, last year he played. This isn't up to date, so I don't know how many games he played, but he seems to miss like 20, 30 games each season. With an ailment. I mean, is Dallas smart here to kind of go out and maybe grab a veteran presence? I mean, they have Anders Lindback.
I think Lindback's the perfect. I think they did the perfect thing there. I really do. I think Lindback's the perfect backup. I think Lindback is a backup goalie. I mean, I think that that they when he was with Rene, with Pekka Rene in Nashville, he was a great backup, a great combination backup. I don't see him as the guy who can carry the load all the time, but he can come in and you're not going to lose. He's not going to let up any bad goals. You're not going to lose the space. He's going to make some great saves for you. He's to me, he's a perfect backup. I like what they did there. Now, the veteran, last year they went with a veteran backup in Timmy Thomas, and it worked okay for them for a while, but then it didn't. So they have to. They can't play Lehtonen back-to-back games. So there's certain situations that they have problems with. So they're going to need a backup who's going to give them at least 25 games. So you're right.
I was thinking like maybe a Brodeur would be good in that situation. Yeah, they
could be. I mean, if Lehtonen was to go down, I think that's the guy they would look to for sure. And that would be a great spot.
Him and Lindy have a good relationship from all the Team Canada Olympics that they've spent together.
I think that's a possibility if Lettinen goes down during the season, but I think right now, going into the season, what they have is what they're going to go with. I mean, Lindbach, for all of his failings last year in Tampa Bay, he didn't play very well during the season. Ben Bishop was clearly one of the best goalies in the league, and they felt it when they lost him and had to go to Guzlevskis in the playoffs because Lindbach was not playing that well. But he gets another chance in Dallas. There's not going to be a lot of pressure on him, and I think he's an NHL goaltender. It's just a question if they had to play him more than, say, 20, 25 games, whether he can handle it. So we'll see.
Big guy, big goalie. For sure.
They look the same, him and Pekka Rinne. Sometimes he didn't even.
Oh yeah, he's bigger than Pekka Rinne too. He's actually bigger. I mean, I've been in the locker room with both those guys, and he's enormous. Lindback is enormous. Let's take some questions from the chat room. First of all, we have. Okay, so Crunchy Hockey 4. Hey, what do you think about the future of Bobby Ryan? If the Sens tank, I could definitely see him as a deadline rental, as he has an expiring contract. However, as a Flyers fan, I drool at the thought of him coming home to play with G. Do you think the Philly could or should make a push to acquire him? This is always the question in Philly, right? The Bobby Ryan question. It's been going on forever. I would love to see it happen. I think that Bobby Ryan should play as a Flyer. I think Bobby Ryan's an underrated player and would be a great Flyer. He's a great person too, great guy, and does come here and train. He trains with Giroux, and he works out with these guys here in the area in the summer. He plays over at the skate zone. So before they all come in, and when he's here visiting his family from the same town as I grew up in. So he's here a lot and visits his mom, and he's always around. So he does work out with the Flyers, so they all know him very well. It comes down to money, and also it comes down to a situation where the Flyers, there's a history with them, and that's usually pretty positive. Although some people say it's on and off. So there's a lot of stuff with Bobby Ryan that comes along with it, and none of it's Bobby Ryan created. So I hope it all works out. I hope they can get it. I hope they can get past that. He's a definite fit.
He doesn't have a no trade clause on the last year of his deal, and if Ottawa,
it won't matter. He'll accept a trade to Philadelphia, so it wouldn't matter.
Right.
That's where he would go. And Ottawa, the Ottawa should move him if they have to. Okay, so let's go. All right. Question here is let me find another question here. Let's see. Any new rumors on the Red Wings getting right-hand defenseman? No, the Red Wings are still sort of in this Daniel Alfredsson haze. What they're going to do with him? I mean, that's got to be figured out before they figure out where they're going to go with their money, I was told. So, does Morgan Riley have a sophomore year sort of like Erik Karlsson did? Tux fan asks. They strike me as similar types of players, and Riley is capable. Do you see Riley as an Erik Karlsson type player?
I don't see Riley winning the Norris, but I think he's going to. He showed signs later in the year of being a guy who is, I think, growing into a top 4 NHL defenseman. I mean, I know that there's been, and that's maybe understating it a bit because not enough people out there seem to think that he could be a very special player. He's very offensively creative. He's got wheels. He physically looks to be able to handle the NHL at age 19. He has a good, just turned 20. He has a really good head on his shoulders, and I actually think he's more advanced as a two-way player than Jake Gardiner is, who's 3 years or 4 years older than him. I think he'll have a really good year, and I think he probably will end up their best defenseman within a year or two. Saying that he's going to win the Norris, which I think what the person is referring to is, I think, a bit much.
And it is something to have a sophomore year, like as a defender, because in the NHL,
it's usually the slump.
Usually the opposite. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of good video coaches in this league, and if you have a weakness, As a goalie or a defender, is there anything, that you can be sure that everyone knows about that weakness and is going to go to that weakness 9 times out of 10 in your second year, and it's going to be if you don't overcome your weakness. I mean, that's really the key. Everybody always says in the NHL, the key if you're going to stick in the NHL is whether or not you can overcome your weakness, because they're going to find it and they're going to exploit it, and if you can overcome it, then you're a 10-year player in the NHL. If you can't overcome it, you're out in 2 or 3 years. So.
And last year in the depths of the slump that they had in the final month of the season, the 2 best defensemen on the Leafs were Riley and Gardner, which should tell you something. And when the pressure was on, the 19-year-old and the 23-year-old were the 2 best defensemen on that team.
Riley's an exciting player. Josh.
One last thing, and then I'll leave you guys alone. Another thought from Elliot Friedman, and we've been talking about him, so I want to bring him up. Evander Kane.
Let's get him on the show next time.
Who, Elliot?
Yeah.
I could ask him. A couple of weeks ago, other teams were pretty sure he was getting traded. Now they are changing opinions, thinking he starts the year in Winnipeg. The Vancouver radio interview makes it tougher for the Jets because teams squeeze them even harder. Kane's best option might be to start the year on a tear and drive up his value. Now, Elliott also had a debate with a NHL exec about Kane. He said if I would trade him, I said it would take a lot because the Jets need help now, and the guy is really talented. He pointed to Vancouver and Ryan Kessler. His argument was, how much better are the Canucks simply because the distraction is over? Difficult to quantify, but definitely a fair point.
A fair point, but also I will debate. I don't know if I'm going to take the side of the NHL executive did or not, but I will say this: I don't think Kessler was a distraction in Vancouver.
No.
Despite the fact that they, that's one thing I'll say. I don't think that they're better, because Kessler was a pro in Vancouver, 100%. Every time he was on the ice. Evander Kane, when he's on the ice too.
It's the off the ice sack. I heard
it's the off the ice for sure, but that, can we overrate that sometimes? I mean, I really do think we do. I mean, it's easy for us in the media to look at it and say, okay, he's got this problem or he's got that issue, but when it all comes down to it, we've all played open hockey, right? We've all played open hockey with guys. Let's just throw this back to our basic thing. We've all played open hockey with guys who are, messed up off the ice, that drink, that just like jerks or whatever, and they come on and they win us championships in open hockey. And we don't care, right? And even though the guy's a drunk and doesn't pay his alimony or whatever.
Imagine if they had Facebook and Twitter back in the 70s and all.
Precisely.
That stuff, right? In the 60s. Man. Terry Sawchuk. There'd be more stuff out about Terry Sawchuk than there already is.
I talked to a player who then became an agent, and now is retired as an agent as well. And he said, my God, he said exactly the same thing. He's like, if there was social media back then, I'd be in jail. He's like, I wouldn't, and he's like, and so would everybody else.
Yeah.
And he's like, and so it's so easy to overblow this kind of stuff. And I think that, teams are going to use this against them because he said he doesn't, But at the end of the day, if you really want Evander Kane, you're going to get Evander Kane, despite whatever he does off the ice or on the ice. I mean, remember, there was no shortage of people wanting to get Eric Lindros, from Quebec. There was. I mean, I'm not going to compare Kane to Lindros, but if a player is talented, as talented as he is, people will go get him and they'll figure out what to do from there. I think it's overblown.
You could see it coming a mile away, Ak, when all this stuff came out about Kane, that it would be an excuse for teams to offer less because Winnipeg would be under the perceived pressure of having to trade him and not having him come back,
right,
with him being so vocal as not wanting to stay in Winnipeg. I mean, it's hockey GM 101 there. It's like, okay, they're under pressure. Let me offer, not include the first round pick. Maybe they'll do it without, maybe in the end they'll end up getting what he's worth or close to what he's worth. But right now, with 6 weeks to go until training camp, in the mind of Kevin Cheveldayoff, maybe he doesn't want Kane to come to training camp with all the distraction and all the problem that it'll be. They're going to continue to do that, but as it gets closer to the season, then maybe things will loosen up a bit.
Yeah, I think they will. I do. I think they will. I do think, to play devil's advocate to what I said before, Winnipeg is a small town, and it is that so it's a little bit different in Winnipeg. It's a little bit isolated, so Evander Kane's stuff is a little bit amplified. But besides that, I still think I think I don't think Elliott's wrong in terms of the fact that teams have changed their opinion on this. I've gotten that same sense. However, I've also gotten the sense that the Jets want to trade him more than ever before too. So I think that they're at somewhere that's going to meet the road, right? That's going to meet the road. So, all right, that's all for today, guys. We went a little bit long here. We appreciate everybody joining us, and thanks for jumping in the chat room. Thanks everybody for subscribing and watching. We really appreciate that. It's amazing us how many of you guys are watching. That we're still doing this show. As long as you guys are watching, we're going to keep doing it through the summer and see how far we can go. We'll talk to you all soon. We'll see you tomorrow. Tomorrow will be Edmonton and Pittsburgh Day. I've got a guest come in, and we will get on with Edmonton and Pittsburgh, and then we will move on from there with the rest of our NHL previews. Plus, we'll also be one day closer to the Ryan O'Reilly arbitration day. So there's that. All right. Remember, guys, without the buzz, it is just hockey. Talk to you soon.